As you may have noticed, there are a lot of people reviewing video games these days, myself included. And some of these reviewers I myself like to watch a lot. But the majority of game reviewers I've watched just aren't very good reviewers, and I've put a lot of thought into trying to understand why they aren't very good. I've created this video because I want to help these people get better at reviewing games, and I also want to talk a little about my own personal process on how I review games, since I've been asked a few times by fans of the RPG Fanatic show. Firstly, to be a good game reviewer, you must be good at articulating your thoughts. Sure, anyone can say something sucks, but can you say why it sucks? If you can't come up with a logical reason for why you don't like something, it's possible that you don't have a logical reason for disliking it. For example, some people hate all anime because the first anime they were introduced to was horrible English dubs of Sailor Moon and Pokemon. That is not a logical reason to hate all anime, since those works represent a small number of the whole industry. It would be like hating all American cartoons just because you didn't enjoy the Hair Bear bunch. There are high art and low art examples in every creative medium, and anime and video games are creative mediums. Secondly, to be a good game reviewer you need knowledge. Actually, this is true for being a critic of any medium. To be a film critic you need to understand how films are made, so for video games you need to understand how video games are made. For example, there is a real science behind game design. While there currently aren't very many good college courses for learning the science, there are many books in the market about the topic, such as Koster's A Theory of Fun for Game Design and Richard Bartle's Designing Virtual Worlds. But in order to have a well-rounded education, you need to learn from more than one perspective. You need to read many opinions from people that know what they're talking about. I myself have studied essays from everyone from Dave Kennerly to Will Wright to Chris Bateman. I have read video game project postmortem reports whenever I can find them. I'm also a very active reader of tabletop RPG design blogs. I've been studying this field since I was 16 years old, and I've even done some design work myself on a commercial product. It's very important to have a firm grasp of game design theory. Most video game players confuse the narrative elements of a game with the game mechanics, but in reality these are two completely different things. For example, there are people who believe every fantasy-themed game is a computer RPG. This is not true. Fantasy is a narrative genre. Computer RPG is a game mechanics genre. The narrative genre determines how the story is classified, but the game mechanics genre determines what the gameplay is like. Do not confuse them as being one and the same, because they are not. A game designer is someone capable of looking past a game's graphics and flavor text to see what the rules of that game actually are. Sadly, many prominent game reviewers have no experience with game design and constantly confuse the narrative and game mechanic genres, which is why a few of them invented terms like JRPG to describe every RPG coming out of Japan as if they all had the same narrative and game mechanics, which they absolutely do not all share. Also, please note that game design is not game programming. Design is a completely separate field. It's really a field of how people learn, because all games are just devices for learning. I'm going to refrain from preaching design theories here, but just know game design is not game programming. It's a science all its own. Many game designers are also game programmers, but not all game programmers are game designers. In my experience, a lot of game programmers don't understand game design very well because game design is best suited to people who are incredibly empathic and able to juggle feedback coming at them from multiple directions. Whereas game programming requires someone much more introverted so they can work out solutions to problems internally. So we've established that knowledge of game design theory and production is needed to be a game reviewer. But what else do you need? Well, most video games today are narrative mediums, which means they have plots. So if you're going to review the plot of a game, you need to understand narrative structure. Video games are also a visual medium, so it helps if you understand the narrative structure used in movies, television shows, and comic books. If you lack knowledge in any one of these three areas, you're not going to be a very good game reviewer, because you don't know how to tell people what they want to know, and your opinion may be formed in a way that is too subjective. For example, there are reviewers who hate certain genres, and this shows in their reviews. Due to their lack of game design knowledge, they have the mistaken idea that people will shy away from a game if it has certain elements that, in truth, may actually attract other people to those games. For example, let's take Saga Frontier 2. There was a reviewer who says the game sucks because it has manga-style graphics. Well, in reality, graphics may add aesthetic value to a game, but they have nothing to do with game mechanics. So having unattractive graphics doesn't automatically mean the whole game sucks. In fact, there are people like myself who kind of prefer manga-style graphics, and even appreciate games that purposely go for a more retro look as a homage to games produced in past eras. As another example, there are people who think Final Fantasy VII sucks because it has a lot of cutscenes interrupting the gameplay of the game. What these reviewers don't understand is that Final Fantasy VII is a console-style RPG, where the objective of the player is to enjoy the story, and the gameplay is merely a means to unlock the story. So those cutscenes they hate so much are actually intended to be the player's reward for overcoming challenges like boss fights, and the really cool summon FMVs are rewards for the player obtaining summon materia, some of which are hidden pretty well in the game. For the audience that Final Fantasy VII was created for, these cutscenes add fun to the game, not frustration. So when you review a game, you need to use knowledge of game design theory to figure out what audience the game was made for, and how well it will satisfy what they enjoy in games. Then you need to explain it to them in terms they can understand, and even if you don't personally like the game, you still need to explain the game in a way so they can make up their own mind. Now, in the RPG Fanatic show, I myself have harshly criticized some games, and a few viewers have commented they felt I was being too harsh or didn't understand the game. As an example, let's use Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter. I was brutal when I reviewed this game, and pointing out things like being penalized for using Ryu's Dragon Mode, and needing to play the game dozens of times to unlock the story, as critical flaws. Some people disagree these elements are flaws, saying they enjoy the difficulty. I recognize there is a small community of Dragon Quarter fans, and I don't think they are wrong for liking the addition of these mechanics to the game. What I disagree with is that these elements should be in a Breath of Fire game at all. I believe Dragon Quarter betrayed the expectations of the overall Breath of Fire fan community. It simply didn't follow the spirit of the franchise. This is the same problem I have with Unlimited Saga and Zelda 2. They are black sheep games that everyone, even their fans, recognizes not really fitting the mold of what audiences expect from a game in their franchises. Anytime a game in a franchise blatantly betrays the spirit of the franchise and goes against the expectations of what a game in that franchise should be, I'm going to be a little bit more critical about that game. This is because part of good game design is to make a game your audience wants to play. Video games are, ultimately, a product. They are art, but they are art that is for sale. This is a consumer-driven industry. Game developers have a duty to make games that audiences want to play, and a responsibility to ensure they make games that will sell, so they don't have to lay off employees because they lost money making a game the audience didn't want to play. I realize there are a lot of people who will take issue with the statement that art should be commercially appealing, but there it is. If it takes a lot of money and time investment to make video games, those games need to make back that money so the people investing their time are properly reimbursed for their work. It is rare when one can create high art while working full-time for Burger King, and I prefer a society where highly creative people can live comfortable lives, while producing high art to one where highly creative people must work a highly uncreative job and live unhappily. There is nothing morally wrong with selling art, and a whole lot that is morally right about it. Oh, there is yet another thing you need to be a good game reviewer. You need to actually play the damn game, not just make shit up based on the first 10 minutes of gameplay. For example, if you're going to review a computer RPG where the major selling point is the story, you might want to play the game all the way to the end so you can give an accurate opinion of that story. And you might want to actually have some knowledge of narrative structure from film school or creative writing classes, or reading books like Stephen King's On Writing and The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers by Christopher Vogler. I mean, would you expect someone reviewing a book to review the book after having only read the first chapter? Would you expect someone to review a movie with having only watched the first 5 minutes? Video games whose major selling point is the story should be treated no differently than novels or books. Play the whole damn game from start to finish, then give your opinion on the story. If you review games without any knowledge about the fields I've mentioned, you basically don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're just judging the game as Joe Blow, the average consumer. You can't tell if the game was designed to appeal to you or not, or who it even was designed to appeal to. This means if you do or don't like the game, you may not actually understand the reasons why you don't, nor can you express them in a way that is useful to other people who the game may actually have been meant for. And please don't comment on my video to say, I know what I like and don't like and why. I don't need to learn anything, because that's just infantile. If all human beings were perfectly logical creatures and always understood themselves, there wouldn't be substantial portions of our society giving themselves lung cancer by smoking, crashing into bus stops because they chose to drink while driving, or snorting crack cocaine while pregnant. Everyone would be a perfectly logical creature that carefully considered the pros and cons of everything when they made choices, and always made the right choice. That large portions of our population failed to do this is evidence that humans really aren't naturally good at understanding themselves and their thought processes, which lead us all to make self-destructive decisions at some points in our lives. I'm the same way. I do stupid shit all the time. The difference is I can put my ego aside and figure out why I chose to do the stupid shit over a more rational choice. A lot of people can't do that, and the people who can't shouldn't be game reviewers. Narrative structure in game design is really about understanding how different types of people think. So study game design if you wish to make good game reviews about video games, okay?